Welcome back to Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate Prowler only. Last time we took on a Hyper Narcilla and a Hyper Nargacuga. This time we are not done with Hyper Monsters, but we are shifting our focus to a more difficult one. At the very least, it's in the highest rank and one I'm sure many people consider to be difficult. Gold Rathian, Hyper Gold Rathian to be specific. A Jurassic Frontier, just for you, is the quest. Very interesting name. Has us hunting a Gold Rathian in the Jurassic Frontier at night. Go ahead and take the quest, have our thunder weapon equipped as per usual, and we'll head on out. Alright, Hyper Gold Rathian. I consider her to be much easier than Hyper Silver Rathalos. That doesn't mean I consider her to be easy though. She's very much a monster you have to respect. If you don't, you're gonna get hit by poison and very high damage. And that can be very deadly, depending on what you're using. For cats, it's not that bad. You have 2 acorns, so poison is kind of nullified. I mean, think about it this way. Your hunter has a health bar that's about, what, 1.5 times at the very least the size it normally is. And it's kind of like Moxie is just kind of proccing at random points. Now, you can't obviously recover them, but I guess Moxie is kind of the best way to describe it because Moxie can only activate once. Which, you know, happens here. It actually activates twice, though, and once you do actually cart, you get 2 of them back. And you can recover them, but it's not always the most convenient thing to run back to camp if you're not using Farcaster. And even if you are, it takes so long to run back anyways, you're just, you know, cutting the time in half, which is fine. Really, and I've said this before, but really the most important places for Farcaster are maps like the Sanctuary, where it's an arena with a bed. There's very few of them, but they do exist. And those are most definitely where you're going to get the most mileage out of being able to recover your acorns. The question is, would you rather be putting your points into going back to camp or actually attacking? And that's kind of the main thing. Once you get to a point where you can comfortably deal with the monster, Farcaster kind of just becomes something that you don't think about. It's probably more fine in multiplayer where your damage is being made up anyways, but at that point you may just play more passively. So while you would, you know, naturally be dealing less damage, you're still being on guard and not being out for the amount of time it takes to heal. And again, even though it's not that much because the camp is so close to the area you would be fighting in, I think it would still just be better to kind of be there in case your teammates, you know, are trying to back off or something and you need to take aggro for whatever reason. Not that aggro is the most consistent thing you can take in this game, but like I said before, you want to give her a lot of space and respect her because if you don't, she will catch you off guard. She's a Rathian. She does the triple tackles when she's enraged. The easiest tell for a Mega Boomerang is when she enrages, and once she gets to lower health, it will be very easy to just, you know, kind of get her out of enrage mode after that timer expires, and then get her very quickly back into enrage mode, and as long as you have enough Mega Boomerangs, you should be getting a consistent amount off on her. The biggest thing is that her face is a hard spot. Obviously, since she's hyper, you get that extra % damage. I think 14%. I keep forgetting if it is infected with hyper. However, it's not right now, so we're not dealing the extra damage there. But it does make the face easier to break. And of course, if you break the face, you get a nice weak spot. Don't remember exactly how much it is. I have not researched a very large amount because I did just fight her and took 15 minutes, a little bit over 15 minutes. So not too bad. Especially for this monster. She has about 14,000 health, I think a little over that, which isn't, you know, it doesn't seem terrible, especially compared to the other monsters we fought. However, she is tanky. You know, she has some very hard spots, but thankfully, since we're a ranged weapon, we can just kind of reach the weak spot that she has, which is her back. Mainly her back. Her wings are not a weak spot, but they are okay for damage. It's going to try to dodge into that. A little greedy of me to actually apply boomerangs there, but that's okay. She's going to flip. Just dodge straight into that. Gonna get some distance here. She's gonna have to do a head turn, so I'm gonna dodge to the left. She does not look at me. That means she's running away. She's gonna fly out, and normally I don't think you can predict where she goes next, so I guess I'll meet you there. All right, on to area 8. I maybe could have gotten a Mega Boomerang there. Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely. Now she's gonna roar here. The area entering animation does not always lead into an aerial mode change, I guess I could call it like that. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times I have been hit because I thought she was just going into that little enrage animation there where she flies, and then she doesn't and just tackles me and deals a bunch of damage to me. So it's definitely important to maybe get at the very least some distance, especially when she's entering the area like that. I think I would have 100% for sure have been safe. So you're probably fine, you know, if you do get her while she's still entering. But if she's on the ground and roaring, I would definitely take caution. Again, caution. That's the biggest thing here. As long as you play it safe, she's not going to be that difficult of a fight. The main problem is if you start getting greedy and trying to throw attacks out, you're getting sloppy with your dodges, anything like that, and you're going to have a much harder time. The tail flip that she usually targets with, it's very similar to Los's just kind of aerial reposition. She will sometimes do an immediate tail flip, and sometimes she'll wait. So it's better to try to just position out of the way of that attack. And the easiest way to do that is to assume she's doing the immediate one. If you do that, then you should at the very least position out of the way of the one where she waits a little bit. And if it's the quick one, then you'll just get the dodge off anyways, or, you know, just reposition naturally. So trying to go for that one always is usually the best. There are some times where she will kind of direct her aim a little bit, so you still need to be careful about that, but as long as you dodge at the very least sideways, you should get the most distance there. That little bite into the tail sweep is a bit scary. I don't know if your iframes last long enough to not be hit by that. I've never really been in the spot to be hit by the tail sweep after the flame bite if I dodge into it. Normally you get enough distance from your roll to not have to worry about being hit by that, so it's maybe possible, especially if you get hit by the tail end of the tail sweep. However, depending on where you dodge, and for the most part where you dodge the flame bite, you shouldn't be anywhere near where that attack ends, so you should be for the most part fine, especially if you just try to get away, which, you know, cats like to do. They like to have some distance, so they do have a chance to actually react to some stuff. She's getting enraged here, so I'm going to try to throw this towards her middle area. Now her legs are an okay hit zone. That's for the Blade Master players out there, so they're not amazing, and obviously you're probably going to attack the legs more for a trip, so you can go for the back. And also weapons with longer reach will still just be going naturally for the wings or the back anyways. The tail, I believe, is at the very least a regular hit spot when not infected with hyper, and from the hit effects that I've gathered, I do believe it is a weak spot whenever it is infected at the very least, and it may still be a weak spot. I just don't really attack it that often, other than, you know, randomly piercing through it with like a mega boomerang or something. That was very close, and that attack does, again, reach very close to her, so you're not just 100% safe if you do like get to a similar situation to where Rathalos would be doing his flame bite. There's like a little small space where you can stand. You can't really do that with her since it's shorter range on the far end, but on the closer end, you know, it hits a bit closer. That's just kind of the trade-off you get there. Broken both wings, unfortunately, did not get a knockdown from it, and she's leaving again, so I guess I'll see where she lands. All right, lands in the little tent area. She's going to tackle into an aerial attack. This little one. I think I am safe to actually get this off here. It's going to be a bit tight, but she does have to head turn at the end. I may get walloped by a tackle. If she did tackle her, I probably got hit by it, but I think I'm fine. I have my defense boost, and that wasn't going to be hyper infected anyway, so I think that would have been okay if I did get hit by it. You're always just trying to see for your Mega Boomerang timings whether or not you just got lucky with an attack, or if it's like a combo or something where they have to do something weird or specific that you don't have to worry about being hit by. That's why you're trying to leverage head turns as much as you can. Obviously, I don't really put the pedal to the metal here and min-max as much as I could, because I am just kind of trying to casually hunt the monster, so hunt times would go down if I did, but I'm not really particularly worried about that. I'm just focused on trying to get the hunt done. Try to dodge this here. The tail hitbox is a bit of a medium-sized one. It's not exact to the model. It is a little bit wider than it looks, so you're not going to be, you know, perfectly dodging it. I think there are some like little dust clouds that puff up whenever she does swing, so try to avoid those at the very least, because you really don't want to be hit by that. I've not been hit by it yet, but obviously if you do get hit by it, especially if you're not at full health, you're going to be in some trouble. And again, like I said before, it's not as big of a deal for cats as it is for hunters, because hunters, you only have the one life you're playing with. Now obviously hunters, at the very least Blade Masters, have the higher defense, so you're not taking as much damage, but you know, that's not always a good thing to lean on, especially for these in-game fights. And again, like I said before, she's not anywhere near as difficult as Silver Rathalos, Hyper Silver Rathalos. I don't know. I don't even want to say that she's as difficult as regular Silver Rathalos in G rank, because she's not. She's a Rathian. I mean, if you fought a Rathian once, you kind of get the idea, or not really once. If you fought a Rathian enough times, even the regular version, you kind of get an idea of what her tool set is. Even when she gets the extra flashy maneuvers, you still get the idea of where the attacks come from and stuff. She's not terribly fast, and she doesn't have a lot of range on her attacks. The deadly ones at the very least. She has the fireballs, but those are very well telegraphed, and they only hit in very specific spots. The scariest ones, I guess, are the charged ones that hit in the quadrants, you know, similar to Silver Rathalos at the very least. So you want to be careful about those, but everything else is just kind of a chance to deal damage, pretty much, which is fine. I don't hate the fight. I am using an adept weapon, though, so yes, fights are going to be significantly easier than if you are using a regular weapon, or non-valor. I'll say it like that. Non-valor or non-adept, the other weapons have a harder time against them. And I know a lot of people don't really like Gold Rathian. Also, she moved pretty quickly here, which is a bit annoying. But I know a lot of people don't really like Gold Rathian that much, and I can understand it if you don't have adept. If you have adept, she's fine, especially for, you know, one of the fastest, I'd say most definitely the fastest weapon in the game. She's definitely fine. You know, obviously you just kind of have to take that damage penalty that cats get naturally. It's not like a specific thing. It's just cats are weak in general. But I don't know. They're very, very, very nice for clearing hunts consistently and comfortably. And as I always say, once you take them into multiplayer, it's not going to matter, especially if you get more than 2 people. Because I need even 2 people. Like if you take 2 cats with their palicos into a lobby, you know, 2 human player cats, you're going to do fine against most everything. I mean, look at what I'm doing and just assume half the time. Obviously, you're not going to be getting as much buffs unless you coordinate your palicos, which I guess could be a really interesting thing. Making sure one cat has the healer stats and the other one has like the palico charisma stats. So, you know, those support moves and such. That would be a neat little combo there, and that would certainly be much stronger than just, you know, having the 2 cats together, because, you know, 2 human players without buffs are still going to be stronger than 1 with buffs. You know, even hunting horn stuff doesn't play that well. Like, the thing about buffs, and you see me there a little bit off to the side and I still got hit by it, I think it's fine, honestly. I don't think it's bad. You know the tail flip is bad, so it's something you have to be careful about. Problem was there, I was in a roll, and I maybe could have shifted the roll direction. However, it was just a bit awkward. I maybe could have soothing rolled there, but I was really hoping I wouldn't have to, and I have to, but I didn't. But back on topic, again, cats in multiplayer, you get kicked a lot. At the very least, in my experience back in the day, I have hardly ever played multiplayer in Monster Hunter in like the last year at the very least, if not longer. And part of that is just because, you know, there's a stigma around cats online. And part of that started back in Generations, where a lot of people would just pick the cat and do the digging move and kind of just camp in the zone, which is not fun. I don't know. But the main thing is they got a pretty big stigma. You know, they weren't terrible in Generations. They were about middle of the pack weapon-wise, damage-wise, let me say it like that. They were okay on utility. The main problem with them was that they didn't get as much gauge gain, so they were less on the supportive side and more on the damage side. Another big problem was you couldn't aim your boomerangs. You just kind of shot them wherever you could on the ground level. So if there was a slope, say goodbye to your boomerang going in a reasonable direction. You could use that if you're really good at the game to, like, you know, aim and hit stuff upwards on like the slopes in the dunes. However, for the most part, not being able to aim upwards and stuff did just kind of stink. Now in Generations Ultimate, not only has that stigma still kind of carried over, but now they're weaker, and a lot of the people who care about damage seem to think about is, I have to be dealing a lot of damage. And you know what? Play the game how you want. That's fine. If you don't want a lobby of people that have slightly lower damage, that's fine, but it doesn't matter. If everyone's pulling their weight on the team, you should be getting decent enough hunt times. You know, and that's just kind of how the game is designed. You're going to be much more they're more outclassed against a monster if you are playing solo. That's kind of just how the difficulty is. You can curb stomp a monster if you bring 4 people, obviously. The game is not hard if you do that. But if you do want to, have a little bit more challenge, or you just can't find the friends or the people online to play the game, you can go up against them solo, and that's pretty much all I've done for, at the very least, 300 hours on this save, and then however long on my other saves as well. So I like it. I like the difficulty customization. If you want a challenge, you can go at it alone and say, hey, I beat this alone. Not that it really matters that much. Or if you just want to have a fun time, you grab a bunch of people and curb stop monsters. That makes the numbers game feel a lot nicer. And especially when the group of 4 has trouble against a monster, it's nice to see everyone slowly improving, carding less, dealing more damage, taking advantage of the tells and stuff like that, to a point where you do start to kind of curb stomp the monster, or at the very least get a consistent clear. Solo, it's much different completely. And, people speedrun the game because there is an appeal to it. The idea of taking on a monster designed for, at the very least, 2.5-ish players solo is fun, especially just exploiting all of its weaknesses. Having the monster constantly on you does make the game slightly easier to predict. I'm not going to say easier in general, because obviously if you have one guy taking the aggro with like a shield weapon, which you can't do really, the aggro system, like I said before, doesn't work like that. But if you have 3 Pierce heavy bowguns in Valor mode sitting off in the corner, or even 4, Valor is enough of an aggro taker or tank to kind of just do that on its own, whether it be through evasion or just the Valor stance. You just have 4 people shooting at a monster, it's gonna go down very quickly. But I've lost my train of thought here. I think you understand what I'm getting at, though. There is a difficulty system in place, and while, yes, Prowlers are not at the top of the pack damage-wise, certainly very, very, very far from it, at the very bottom, I think they have their appeal. And again, if you're going to be playing with other people, it doesn't matter that much. So just try to have some fun with it, I guess. Again, not to say that if you don't want to play with cats, you have to play with cats. Don't play with cats. That's fine. If... trying to find my words here, I can't really think about it, but if you're just that bothered by it, okay, whatever. Enjoy the game how you want to enjoy it. I don't see anything wrong necessarily with that. I think there's maybe a bit of a lack of understanding, but if that's how someone enjoys the game, it's the same reason that I personally, I guess, don't really enjoy Wilds that much. It's a fine game, certainly, but there's just a difference to the combat flow for me. I can't force myself to like it a certain way. I have to enjoy this genre, I guess, the way I like it and the way I've come to like it. So when there are changes made, I may be for them, I may be against them, but I'm not going to get mad at someone for enjoying it, at the very least. This is very, I guess, deep. I didn't mean for it to get that deep, but, some people are going to be upset. Some people aren't. And that's perfectly fine. There are these games I can go back and play, and I enjoy that. I would love to see an older style Monster Hunter come back. I'd love to see them have the B team work on one. I don't know how feasible that is. I'd love to see this game actually get an FPS boost on the new console. That would be nice, but I highly doubt that's going to happen. That was a nice dunk. I don't know. It's just it's a very interesting topic, and I know it's probably been talked to death in recent times, at the very least, as of recording this. So, you can take it or leave it. There are certain aspects that I like about both genres, and that's kind of my whole point, is that there are certain aspects you like about the game, and if you're forced to play it a certain way to be optimal, or if you're forced to play it a certain way and it doesn't just feel right, I completely understand. Doesn't mean I agree, but I understand. Either way, I'm going to get off of that weird random rant and try to finish her off. We're over 20 minutes now, so that means she should be going down pretty soon. Most of her parts have been broken. Well, not most of her parts have been broken, but most of the main ones that do get broken. The back hasn't been broken yet, but I have been hitting the wings a lot. fact, I maybe heard a part break sound. I may have just imagined that. It's kind of a me thing here. Obviously, if we were using the Fatalis weapon, then we'd be getting a better time here, but even then, obviously my test hunt went better than this one has. I've not been spamming Mega Boomerangs as much as I should. That was a nice dunk once again. I'll try to be a little bit more aggressive and maybe be able to pull some better moves off. She's going to limp away now. Now she'll fly away. Sometimes she'll land in a different area where she doesn't limp just to fly away again. It's kind of weird. Some monsters just do that. So I'll try to meet you where she sleeps unless I just take her out randomly. All right. I don't think she sleeps here, but she is going to land for a bit of a fight. So we'll try to snipe her with this. I should have started that earlier if I didn't want to be ate by the tackle, but that's okay. She did the tackle finish animation, and you know when she ends her tackles because she will do a little flame bite at the end of her tackle. So as long as you look out for that tail, should be fine. And obviously she does not always do a triple tackle when she tackles, or a tackle combo. Like you saw there, she did a tackle into a backwards fireball. This looks like the triple tackle. Nope, it's double tackle into a tail flip. Which I believe the third tackle does not hit you. It's only the tail flip. So you should be fine if you nudge your hitbox or something. If you're trying to get close to doing an adept dodge or something, you don't have to dodge the tackle, but you do have to dodge the tail sweep. Obviously, that's the main thing you're probably going to try to go for. All right, cutting it a little close with that, but we're okay. Keep dodging that. As always with the flame bites on the hyper monsters, just assume it will hit you. If it doesn't, great. You're fine to dodge again if you need to for a combo attack. If you get the dodge, then that's also great. You just don't want to be hit by that and then susceptible to a follow-up combo from something. Not that she has too many follow-up combos, but, again, you just give her respect and you shouldn't have a very hard time. I lost one acorn there, and that was just because of a sloppy move that, granted, was a bit weird. It was that roll in a weird direction, but went pretty well at the very least, in my opinion. All right. Back to the hub. No weapon today because, as always, no rare species equipment. So nothing really there at the very least. I'm sure it would have been a really nice one. Probably maybe some negative affinity, and I guess we can look at the hunter equipment and kind of compare that there. I'd say dual blades are probably the closest thing to what we have. Obviously, damage is a bit weird because we have our own base damage added to it. And there may not even be Gold Rathian equipment, and I may not even be able to see it. I guess I should look for it. Give me just a moment. Okay, so kind of forgot you can't really make any Gold Rathian equipment from scratch. So instead, I'm going to compare maybe what it possibly would be like, and I'm going to look at the sword and shield and use that stats. There's no bloated stats or anything in this game, so you could just use anything, but I'm going to try to compare it, especially when using the Dread Queen Rapier. If I want to make any comparisons, I have to compare it to a weapon I actually have and then kind of jump from there. Main thing, though, is that it's going to be mostly similar. So for the Dread Queen Sword and Shield and the Gold Rathian Sword and Shield, there is not a lot of difference. In fact, I want to say the Gold Rathian one at max level is actually slightly worse than the Dread Queen one. So, and I'm just going to read these off here. The Dread Queen Rapier at level 15 has 290 raw, 44 poison, and 10% affinity with a very small amount, especially for Sword and Shield, of purple sharpness. For us, we only get white sharpness for the Dread Queen Rapier double cross because we don't use sharpness, so we kind of usually get a penalty. Not always, but normally if the weapon has somewhat middling to low of a certain type of sharpness, then you usually go down. And again, not always the case, but for here that is the case. So another thing, at the very least, comparing the Dread Queen Rapier to the Sword and Shield, is that we actually get a little bit more raw. So it's a bit weird. Cats are split, so their damage comes from the cat and the weapon itself. So naturally, our base raw on weapons are significantly lower than hunter weapons, because we're also making up with the other half of the cat, doing a lot of the work. Just fairly interesting. Technically, you do have higher raw depending on the cat you're using than a base hunter weapon. However, motion values make that a moot point. So for us, specifically with this cat here and this weapon, it'd be, and I had it over here for a second, it'd be 104, which is our base attack without any power charms or anything, plus 195, which is the raw, which would make it 299. So that's actually 9 more raw than the base on the Dread Queen rapier for the hunter side of things. So again, 9 raw is not going to do much, especially in the way of motion values. And we also have negative affinity on this, so that kind of evens it out a little bit. I'm sure that 9 raw is probably about the same. In fact, it's probably a bit worse because you have negative 15% affinity here with, you know, what you're working with. Next up is the Gold Rathian Sword and Shield. And again, not much is really different here. 290 raw, which is the same as the Dread Queen Sword and Shield. 45 poison, which is the same as our Dread Queen rapier, but you lose the 10% positive affinity that you get on the Dread Queen weapon for the Sword and Shield side. So I don't really find 10% affinity to be worth a single point of poison. Also, your sharpness is slightly worse. It has more white sharpness than the Dread Queen weapon. However, the overall white and purple sharpness of the Dread Queen weapon is more than the white, at the very least without using any sharpness boosting skills. So the only thing you really gain from the Gold Rathian weapon is the 2 slots and the 1 point of poison. If we were to take that into Prowler terms, it would probably not be that much different at all for this weapon. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to just kind of make this a hybrid between the two. You have negative affinity, which again is not great, but slightly higher raw, and the 45 poison and white sharpness. So again, kind of just a cross between them with negative affinity because of course. So all in all, wouldn't be that much different, but I think the design would have been probably pretty cool. There's also a different Gold Rathian weapon that's fire element based. That one would have obviously been better at the very least for Prowlers in general because element is better than status in most cases. However, I'm not going to compare that because I don't really feel like I need to. It probably would not be better than the Hyper Ignactor weapon because that one is just very good for some odd reason compared to the rest of the monsters, especially fire ones that you get. But yeah. Either way, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider leaving a comment below and maybe even consider subscribing. Until next time, bye.